Good morning. Good morning. The subject of today is Key, the God of Abraham, Noah, Israel? Is Key the God of Israel? Is Key the God of Israel? I tend to believe it is. And Key in the Akkadian is called Iya. Iya. And we're in the month of Iya right now. And I would never have known the meaning of that month if it weren't for William Ricketts Cooper, who wrote a book called An Archaic Dictionary, which actually defines the months. Um, Sometimes the spelling of words makes it hard to find the original meaning because I's, J's, and Y's are interchangeable in English, and so but they sound differently when you pronounce them. So anyway, some questions are. Let's see. I don't want that. It says here, the Sumerian word key is the root of our English word key, which makes sense. So here's a word from an English word, key. A key. What is a key? A key is an instrument for opening a lock, right? So a key opens a lock, and a key opens a lock. So a key is like the instrument of knowledge or wisdom. And that's a word that we have in English. And in Latin, they also have key. People say "aki." What does that mean? It's here. Where is it? In French, you could say "qui," like what. So it has to do with who, why, when, what, where. So key would be the word key. The ancient Sumerian word key is the root of our English word key, meaning wisdom, intellect, science, know-how, reason, logic, the mind of God, called the Logos in Greek, and called Iya by the original Akkadian and Aramaic speaking Hebrews. So when the Hebrew races are calling something Iya, they're actually talking about God, Iya. And so I listed out some of the biblical prophets that have names including Iya, which is also known as Ki in the Sumerian, and that would be Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, Obadiah, Zephaniah, Haggai, possibly Haggai or Haggaiah. I think it's probably Haggaiah. Zechariah, Elijah, and also the name Joshua and Jesus containing the name Iya, as in Iyah, Iyashua, which means Iya saves me. I'm saved by Iya. Iya is the salvation. So what is Iya? Well, Iya is same as Ki. Iya is the intellect. Iya is the intellect of God. So one of the things that we should consider is that the intellect, or let's talk about scientism. You know, if you want to look at some of these people, they say, well, it's just the ability to build things or make things, right? Because like, let's say you have some of these people that find out about these Sumerian gods and say Prometheus gave man the fire, and so therefore Prometheus, he's the god of science. Well, he is the god of science, or Ki. So Ki is the god of science, but scientism itself, if it's just scientism, then that's not the complete key. That's not the complete key, right? The complete key would be not only the mastery of the physical sciences, but also one's conscience. So you wouldn't have the complete key if you're just able to master the physical science. If you're able to build a better electronic prison to hold all the human beings on the earth in, then you don't have the complete key, right? The complete key would be a mastery of the physical sciences and the science of right and wrong and good and evil, which is of your conscience, So scientism itself is not the key, but it's part of it, because if you look at the Greeks, they have physics, the subject of physics, and they have the subject of metaphysics. So they have the subject of how theos is the source of physics, and also metaphysics. That which is beyond physics, justice, righteousness, truth, uh, right and wrong. So these all fall under the heading of ki, but not ki as the mastery of craftsmanship or science, but of one's soul. And so you don't have the complete ki if you don't have both. And there's a lot of people who might be good at engineering, which is definitely the key. The key is engineering. But if they're just building things that uh, aren't in harmony with the conscience, the human conscience, then it's not really the key, is it? In fact, it could become something very ugly and something anti-Christ could develop out of that. So I had this question last year when I was going through this of what is the second month, and I thought I was confused about the first month and the second month for good reason, because it gets confusing. And but we know that in the story of Noah, that the second month is this month. It's the month of Ki, or the month of Iyah. And so Iyah, if you say that the name or the name of the month, which is Iyah, well, let's see, how are they pronouncing it today? Iyaru. So if you said Iyaru, but it's really Arah. And so because you could say Arah or Iyar or Iyaru. So those are variations of Arah, the month of Iyah, which is the month we're in now. And Iyah is, of course, the God of Israel. And all the prophets who have the last name Iyah at the end of their name, like Isaiah. Now, because the spelling is kind of strange between English and these ancient Akkadian words, I always looked at the name Iyah, and it was like an E and an A. So I never connected it to this other word, which is Yahuwah, Yahuwah. But so Yahuwah appears to me to actually be properly pronounced Yahuwah, not just Yahuwah, like we're in English, so we put a Y there. But that Y is actually Yahuwah, or Iyah, or Iyahu. So yeah. So that would be the God of the Israelites. And it's the God not only of craftsmanship, because if you notice the God of the Bible, he comes to Noah, he tells him to build an ark. He comes to the Israelites and tells them how to build a golden ark. Tells them how to build a tabernacle, right? So he's like, notice how Jesus is the son of a carpenter, right? He's the son of a carpenter. And Noah was a carpenter. I think that's interesting. I think that's an interesting part of the story. And Solomon builds temples and so forth. But I had another person who was watching my video when I was covering the subject before, and he pointed out, because I started talking about the story of Adam and Eve and how I never liked that story. But he pointed out that if you notice, there's this line in the Bible which says God is fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, or the beginning of knowledge. Starts with fear of God. And this ties into this idea of scientism versus the complete key. Because if you don't fear eternity, you don't have the complete key, right? If you think you can just build a better electronic prison with flying robots to kill everybody, you don't have the complete key, because that's a world devoid of God. So even if you know how to create things through scientism or technocracy, you could still have a world that's completely devoid of God if you don't have the complete key of the human soul and the conscience, good and evil, right and wrong. If you don't have that part of it, you don't have the complete key. That's important to know. So, okay, so on the calendar, now, one of the things is, like, if you notice, of course, this goes back to this ancient Akkadian and Sumerian philosophy, right? and they had three gods. They had three gods in the Akkadian or Sumerian. The Sumerian pantheon has three primary gods. I believe it's Anu and Enki and Enlil. Is that correct? Is that the triad of the gods? Anu, Enki, and Enlil. Anu, Enki, Enlil. I think that's what it is. What it is? The supreme triad of the Sumerian Mesopotamian pantheon: Anu, Enlil, and Enki. That's correct. Now, they one of the things that confused me earlier on this story was that how they associated God Enki as the god of water, and so Ki means water. That's what I thought. It doesn't mean water. It means wisdom. It means wisdom, intellect, the logos, reason, uh, the mind of God. That is the key. And Lil is associated with the wind, and Lil is wind. El is wind. And Anu is the sky. So now it's funny because I made a video a long time ago about how the early Christians said that Genesis 1 was about this Trinity when it says, and God God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. So there's the use of the plural. Let us make man in our image after our likeness. And they said, well, that's the Trinity. And I'm like, well, it's not really the Trinity. It's a reference to these old gods of Mesopotamia, because because the books were changed by the Israelites when they came out of Egypt, and there's only one God, and he's represented through what? His word, but also the Holy Spirit. And if you look at the meanings of these three gods, Anu is the sky god, but it's almost like you want to think of Anu. You could think of Anu as just the sky with all the stars in it, but really the blackness of the sky behind the stars. The source of all the stars is this thing called Anu. And then you have Ki. So you have Anu, which is the sky. You have Ki, which is the wisdom of God. So God is known by the wisdom or the logos, and God is known by Enlil, which is the wind, or in Christianity or in the Bible. See, the wind, God blows his spirit into his breath into Adam, right? So you've got Anu, Ki, and Enlil. That's the sky god Anu, which is the blackness behind the stars. And you have the Ki, which is the logos, and you have Enlil, which is the wind. So that's literally Theos. If you want to think of Theos in that way, Theos is as this source of all things, right? If you want to think of Theos as the primary source of the light of the stars, then he would be like kind of associated with that blackness of the sky. And then you have Ki, which is the logos, which also in Christianity would be called the light, but it's not. Ki isn't associated with light in the Sumerian and Akkadian, but you could think of it that way in Christianity. So you have and then you have the wind, which is the Spirit, the Holy Spirit. So in the Christian Trinity, you have Theos, Logos, Pneuma, which is God the Father, and the Logos, which is Ki, and the Holy Spirit, which is Enlil. So it's not that those old gods were really gods, but they see God is known by certain things. That's what people are trying to say when they're communicating things through symbolism. God is like Ki. So you can know what God is through the Ki. See, God is the intellect. God is the intellect, the divine intellect. So the source of life has this thing called divine intellect, and you have the divine intellect, or at least you can. You're capable of it. Now, if you have only partial intellect, but you don't have the complete intellect because maybe you don't know the difference, but like, I don't want to get into politics, but maybe you don't know why a man shouldn't be in women's sports or something. Okay, let's just keep it really. then you don't have really your intellect is not complete, right? If you don't know the difference between a man and a woman, you don't have a complete intellect. If I have to argue with you about that, then your intellect is diminished. Okay. And but that's just one area of life. There's a lot of areas of life. Anywhere you don't if you're in any way involved in, like, you're irresponsible in any way, you don't have the complete intellect. If you're irresponsible towards your family, you don't have the complete intellect. If you're irresponsible towards your work, you don't have the complete intellect. Like, you don't try to do what is right. You're lacking righteousness, right? So you have these three factors. You have theos, you have the logos or the key, and then you have the pneuma or enlil. So one of the things, like, if you ever argue with Muslims about God, they'll say there's only one God. See, they think God is a math problem. They think it's a mathematical problem. And so they say there's only one God, and then everything else is a creation of God. And it's like, okay. But the difference is, in Christianity, we're talking about the character of God. How do you know what God really is? How do you know what it really is? Well, and then when they wrote the four gospels, they said, well, it's like this, and then they had the teachings of Christ. See, God is like this. This is how you would know it, right? It's like this. If it's not like this, then it couldn't be the real thing, right? And so it's like, well, what's the character of God, right? It's like Jesus Christ, or it's like the wind. It could be like the wind. See, it's like that wind that comes over you, that feeling of goodness, which is like a breeze coming over you. Like, it's called the Holy Spirit, right? So now that feeling of goodness isn't wind, but it's like the wind, you see, or that feeling, that animative feeling of your soul, right? You want to go out and live. So that's that feeling of goodness, of that animation, feeling of animative power. That's like the wind. See, it's not the wind, but it's like the wind. And so the logos and the pneuma would be two characteristics of God, and these are depicted in the original Sumerian gods. You have Anu and Lil and Enki, the three, and so that really is the Trinity. Actually, that's the source of that could be viewed as primarily the source of the Trinity. When you think of it as theos, logos, and pneuma, it is all actually right there. So, how is Ia spelled? So that's an interesting thing. Like, how are they spelling it? So this is, if you see there, Ia. That is how the name Ia is spelled in Akkadian, and this is how Enki is spelled, or the symbol for key in. Oh, that's Sumerian. Yeah. Yeah, there was Akkadian. So that's Sumerian key. And this is Akkadian Ia. And the written script appears to be closer to, the evolution of the written script appears to be closer to Akkadian, as far as like the English language, or the Greek, or the Phoenician, or the Latin. It seems like it's closer in script writing to the cuneiform version Ia. But we still have both. We still use the word key in the English language, and in Latin, we use the word key. So our words do go back to Sumeria, and our words do go back to Assyrian, Chaldea, right? Those of us who speak English and German and Latin and Greek. Okay, so the calendar, of course, we don't have to go through that too much because we've been through it so many times before. But here's a really messy look at it. We're in the first month. We're in the second month, and the 17th day. We're going to get 40 days of the ARK rising into the air. That takes us to right to the beginning of right to the end of the third month, which is June 13th, the waning moon. Then we get a new moon on the fourth month. Takes us 150 days to the ninth month, the beginning of the ninth month, and it ends there. And then you have the 10th month, the first day of the 10th month, you get another 40 days. So it's interesting how on the top of that calendar, you have a 40-day period on both sides. And then you have like a piece in the middle surrounded by two week periods. But It gets a little complicated up there because let me tell you something. Oh, and also the other thing is you have the equinoxes and the solstices. See how they're through a cross right there? Isn't that the sign of the cross? Of course it is. Of course it is. That's the sun on the cross right there. And then at the 7th month, down at the bottom, you'll see that's the equinox where the ark lands on the mountains of Araratu. And Araratu means the land of flowing rivers. Araratu means the land of flowing rivers. So, yeah. Okay, so here's an interesting thing. So if we're going to listen to the key, or if we're going to have, we're going to look at the Bible. So we have Noah. He hears the key, and it saves him. Now, why did God talk to Noah? Because he was a righteous man. He was a righteous man who walked with God. He always did what is right. So here's the point I want to make. If you read the Proverbs, is the Proverbs about how to construct a better widget? Are the Proverbs about how to build, construct engineering and all that? No, it's about doing what is right. The Proverbs are about what is doing what is right. Are the Proverbs the worship of the key of wisdom, of the intellect? Absolutely. The intellect of God is seen in the Proverbs, right? That is the intellect of God. Don't go with the evil people. Go with the good people. Do the right thing. Don't do the wrong thing, right? The whole premise of the Proverbs is based on the key of the divine wisdom of doing what is right. See? But the way the story starts is with, of course, with Adam and Eve, actually. And this is a story I never liked because I was like, well, I like wisdom. And why is that bad? Well, I think what the story is now that I've looked at it again, I think what the story is saying is this is how man got the mind of God, right? He ate from the fruit of the tree of good and evil, and then he had fear of God, right? Before that, he didn't have fear of God. So this is where you get this idea: fear of God is the beginning of knowledge. Somebody introduced that idea in my last video on this subject, and it's actually a very important idea. Now, when you say fear of God, what are you fearing? Eternity. You have fear of eternity. What's going to happen in eternity? How is what you're doing right now affecting eternity? Now, I personally believe in reincarnation. So I believe that you're going to die and then you're going to go back to what you were doing again, anew. So that's my personal belief. What kind of world are you leaving for everybody and for yourself when you come back to? See, if you're irresponsible, and you spend your life doing what is wrong, then you're going to go back to a mess. And that's how people have been leaving the world. They've been leaving it as a big pile of garbage for the next generation. The next generation has been inheriting a giant disaster generation after generation, right? Through all the wars, through all the violence, through all the degeneracy, through all the filth that's coming out of the media and the sickness, and all the drugs and the poison and the toxins in the food and the medications that are designed to, exterminate the population. Like you have this genocidal impulses on the earth that are not being dealt with, and so you end up coming back. You're born a child into this new system, and this is your eternity. You're looking into eternity, right? So if you fear God, you fear eternity. You fear eternity. What is eternity going to be? And I'm not saying the person has to be born reincarnated all the time, but it seems to me that's where people are at. And it's like where are we all reincarnating back into forever? Is it going to be just more of the same? So that's the kind of fears that I have. That is the fear of God or the fear of eternity. Yeah. So this idea that this is so I think now when I look back at the story of Adam and Eve, it's really sort of, well, how did he get his wisdom? And then they told a story about how he gained wisdom and immediately had fear of God, right? Now he fears God because now he has wisdom. See, now that he has wisdom, he fears God. He fears eternity. Before he didn't. He had no wisdom. He didn't fear God. And so people who don't fear eternity don't have the true key. There you go. People that don't fear eternity don't have the true key. If you don't fear your eternity, you don't have the key, right? You don't have the key. Because if you had knowledge, if you had wisdom and knowledge, you would fear eternity. And I do. I do. That's why I want to do what is right. That's why I want to do what is right, because I am terrified of eternity. Not just me doing what is wrong, but all these other people with all these genocidal impulses and perverse impulses and corrupt impulses and criminal impulses lording over the world and creating this future civilization that we're going to inherit. We're going to inherit it. See, that terrifies me. Being born a baby in this world of absolute danger, not only through war and through all the drugs that they're pushing on, newborns. I don't want to get into the whole thing, but it's terrifying. So if you don't fear eternity, you don't have the complete key. You don't have the complete key. So, so there's that. So that's important. So, but also you want to be able to build things, right? So this is the other thing. If you look at how things kind of evolved with some people in Christianity that didn't really understand the story, is they're like, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I'm bad, and God's in control, and I'm just going to keep being my miserable self, and it's all going to work out great. No, it's not. You actually have to become like God. And so I was passing this. There's like a church on the corner, and they had a sign outside that says, "We're called to be human, not perfect." And it's like, well, actually, that's not what it says at all in the Bible. It says, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." In other words, the entire discipline of original Christianity was to become like God. That's called theosis in the Greek. So, like, for instance, in Greek Orthodox Christianity, they have this term called theosis, to become like God. And so the whole premise of the religion of following Jesus Christ is become like God through this model of the key, which is Jesus Christ. Right. So literally you are supposed to become perfect. The whole idea is to perfect yourself, to perfect your conscience, to perfect your soul and your conscience. How does one perfect their conscience? How do you perfect every part of your life? Right. That is the key of the God of Israel. See, that is the key, is to become perfect. You want to become perfect. You want to perfect yourself. That is the entire basis of the religion. You thought it was just about believing silly stories. It's not. It's about becoming perfect. Matthew 23, I don't know which verse it is, but be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. This was also the impulse of the Athenians and the Stoics. It's like, how do I become perfect? Following this thing called the logos, which is reason, which is the key, the divine intellect. See, is the whole thing. That's why the whole premise of Athenian society and Greco-Roman and Europe was, what is the ideal? It was a culture of idealism. Do we live in a culture of idealism today? No. And this is because we have very low tier philosophy. It's the philosophy. You could take stories of the Bible and turn it into a disastrous, idiotic philosophy. Partially by just thinking it's every story in there is literal, and so you never get the meaning of the thing. You never find the meaning of the thing. That's one way. There's a lot of people like that, and a lot of those people are sick, and they have a bad diet, and they're dying of all kinds of self-inflicted ailments, and their mind is a mess, and they're miserable. So that's what I'm trying to say. That's not the key, right? If you're following the key, you are perfecting your soul. You're perfecting everything. You're seeking to perfect everything about you. Why? Because you want to live, you want to survive, and you want the future generations to survive. See, if people are putting the key as the thing that they are emulating and trying to access, and trying to base their life on, then we're making progress. See, we know what the key is. people have an intrinsic understanding of what the ideal thing is, unless they're mentally diminished. And there are a lot of people that's why you have to argue with people about why they shouldn't eat poison, or why they shouldn't be a pervert, or why they shouldn't this or that. It's like you have to argue with, and don't ever do that. Don't ever argue with them, because it's mental. You're arguing with something you're arguing with a mental illness. And so that's the thing about the mind, right? The mind is or the key, or the logos, is pure reason. But you could have logical explanations for stuff which are irrational. So you have irrationality would be the opposite of that. So, but if you're following the key, then you're seeking righteousness, justice, truth, reason, the divine intellect, good and evil, right and wrong, the knowledge thereof. And so that would be the true key. Now, when it comes to this calendar and how that fits into it, I would say this: it's summertime. I'm excited about it. The sun's going to be going up into the summer solstice. We've got a lot of sunshine. I'm going to be building my business. I'm going to be working hard. I'm going to be eating good. I'm going to be running through the hills on sunny days and doing some weightlifting and sleeping good at night and just taking care of myself and taking care of my loved ones and just making the best year that I can. And so that is very forward looking. Is how you should be when you're looking at this calendar. We're heading into the summer months, and that's really what this kicks off. But the last thing I'll say is it's very interesting that just so you know this. So I was counting through the calendar months, and next year Easter is going to be in March, and Passover is going to be in April. So there's a deviation between when the Jews are doing Passover and when the Christians are doing Easter in 2027. So sometimes they're at the same time, and sometimes they're off a little bit, and then this time they're off and a ways off in completely different directions. And why is that? Because the calendar is kind of strange. How the Jews are depicting when to celebrate Passover is different than the Christian calendar time of Passover. And so when I looked at it, because I was counting through the months, I noticed that so this year, because I went through all the months and I was counting them, and I realized that based on the when the Jews are going to celebrate their Passover, that gives you 13 months in the year. Whereas where the Christians are doing it gives you 12. So I don't know. This is kind of strange. How do I explain this? So when I counted through all the months, and I got to the 12th month, because right now we're in the second, right? So if you take us, we're in the second, and you go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you're into December, and then 11, you're into what? Oh, December, January, and then 12, you're in February, and then that would be the next month would be number 1, and you would of course be in March. But on this calendar, the next session, which is 2027, March, the new moon starts before the equinox, and the Jews don't do it that way. They wait till they wait till the moon, and then they do the following new moon, which would be the first month following the equinox. So they're not even going to have a Passover until much later in the year. Like they're going to have a Passover in what would that be? April? Yeah, it won't even be till almost the end of April. Wow, the third week of April. So they're going to say that's the new month. Okay, well I guess that's the middle of the month there. So okay, so I guess that's not too far off. But so the Christians are going to do Easter in March. They're going to do Easter in March. So they're saying that they're saying that the new moon, which is in 2027, will be March 8th and 9th. And then you have a full moon on the 22nd. And that's the the equinox is on the 20th. So it's like the full moon and the equinox go together there. But that is, I don't believe that's how the original Akkadians did it. The Akkadians had or the Babylonians, they had a festival, and they would have the first new moon after the first new moon following the equinox would be would begin their festival, and then it would go on for 12 days. That's how they would do it. So they would have a new moon. So that they would start that on when would they start that? They would start that on April 6th of 2027. And that would go for 12 days. So anyway, it looks like but so that would give this month, that would mean there would be 13 months before the next Passover, or before the next Nisanu, the month of Nisanu. So anyway, that's that. I don't know that I have anything else to say on the subject, other than if people were to follow the key, then they would be smarter, happier, better. They would look better. They would feel better. They'd be stronger. They would be less. Everything about them would be better if you followed the key. It's a real thing. It's wisdom, intellect, knowledge of God. Then you would be a better person. And so if you fear God because you fear eternity, then that's what you would do. And you would encourage other people to do the same, so that you would inherit a better world in the future. End of stream.